Isn't the whole point of freedom of speech that we protect speech at the margins? We protect controversial speech, we protect speech that is radical or outside the norm or not accepted by the majority of the community. Isn't that the whole idea?
Absolutely. I think if you are a proper free speech advocate, you will spend your whole time defending obnoxious people. That's what you have to do. H.L. Mencken, the great American essayist, made this point. He said it's really hard fighting for freedom because you spend your whole time defending scoundrels, because oppressive laws are first aimed at scoundrels and you have to stop them at the start. And that's the way it goes. You know, even if it's an extreme Islamist or a racist or an anti-Semite or an intolerant religious fundamentalist, when it's those people whose speech is being attacked, you have to defend them every time. For the basic principle that if one person's speech can be undermined on the basis that it offends the majority, then who knows whose speech could be up next.
Of course, it's not always radical speech, it's not always speech at the margins that needs to be protected or that laws like, for instance, Section 18C apply to. 18C is a great example of where you've got, for instance, university students being taken to court at the moment, as we do in Australia, for saying things that really I don't believe to be at the margins of what is acceptable speech. One student, Alex Wood, was taken to court for saying, just got kicked out of an unsigned Indigenous computer room, QUT, which was the university he was at, stopping segregation with segregation. That seems to be quite a moderate position to take and certainly a contestable political idea. So in 18C, I think we've got an example of a very low threshold being created by these laws.
So I think the QUT case is a really good example of, as soon as you allow the state to patrol speech, to fix the parameters of acceptable thought, to determine what is hateful and what is non-hateful, then it will use that potentially, or individuals will use that, to try and prevent the expression of ideas they simply don't like. That's why I think you've got to stop it now before it goes further, and before you know it, people could potentially be arrested and punished in other ways simply for holding views that others don't like. And it's in the West, across Europe and America in particular, it's reached epic proportions. You know, in Britain, for example, 30 student unions have banned Robin Thicke's song Blurred Lines on the basis that it is offensive to women. There was a hilarious incident at Oxford University where someone accidentally played it at the kind of student night out, and the student union official leapt up to switch the sound system off, which really reminded me of when I was at Catholic school and the nuns would always switch off the sound system when Madonna came on or something. So, and you know, there are other incidents. They've banned the Sun newspaper from campuses, lads mags, and speakers. You know, Germaine Greer has always been hounded off campus because she is supposedly transphobic. I was banned from speaking at Oxford because I don't have a uterus. I was supposed to speak on abortion. I was supposed to give the pro-choice case. But 300 feminists decided that someone without a uterus should not be allowed to talk about abortion, and they had successfully had the debate called off. So there are numerous incidents in Britain where students are now explicitly banning things, including newspapers and magazines. So they are attacking press freedom itself, one of the most important aspects of freedom of speech.
It's an incredibly anti-community idea, I guess. The idea that you should be protected from ideas and concepts and speech that you might disagree with is not just a freedom of speech issue. That's an issue for human beings operating together in a community, as you should be on a university campus in particular, where the cut and thrust of debate is something that should be normal, it should be par for the course. What do you think are some of the practical and long-term consequences of these sorts of policies, this sort of culture on university campuses?
I think the consequences are terrible. They will be terrible. I think you're right. It's extremely antisocial. It's very misanthropic. And I think censorship is always driven by misanthropy. You know, freedom of speech is really an expression of trust in people, in their ability to hear all ideas, to judge for themselves whether they're good or bad, to push certain ideas to one side, to embrace others. People who support freedom of speech generally trust ordinary people to negotiate public life without needing constant help and advice. Whereas censorship, by contrast, is always an expression of distrust. You don't trust men to watch violent films because they might become rapists. You don't trust women to be able to see images of naked women because it might damage their self-esteem. It's always an expression, a paternalistic expression of concern about the ordinary, average citizen's ability to go through life without constantly feeling offended and harmed. I think the consequences will be terrible. The consequences will be a rise of dogmatism. Because if you live in this bubble and never subject your ideas or yourself to ridicule or public debate or disagreement, then you just become someone who believes things because you think they're right, not because you've tested them or argued for them in the public realm or stood up for them in an argument. And as a consequence of that, you become a dogmatist. And this is a point John Stuart Mill makes in On Liberty. He says the only way you can know if you are right, if what you say is true, is by testing it as much as possible. And that's why he says you should welcome opposition, you should welcome difficult debate, you should welcome ridicule, because it keeps you on your toes, it keeps your moral muscles well exercised.